The Ys series has been running for 37 years now, and it's nowhere near its climax. I've also been a long-time fan of this legendary series that has changed the world of action RPGs while staying relatively niche. But after Ys 9 Monstrum Nox, I was left disappointed with the series' direction. But all of that changed with the release of Ys 10 in the West, an excellent entry that captures both adventure and nostalgia, but it does have its flaws. So in today's review, we'll embark across the ocean with Adol the Red yet again for another adventure to add to our saga, in Ys X Nordics, the latest entry in the series. To answer the question, should you play Ys X Nordics? Well, let's get into the review and find out. To start off this review, I want to answer a common question. If this is Ys 10, do I need to play the previous entries? Thankfully, no. Each entry is a retelling of Adol Christin's adventures through his books, so think of each entry being records told from his point of view. And each game isn't in chronological order, so Ys 10 is actually one of Adol's earlier adventures. Even if it's the latest game in the series, you can still play it now, but it won't affect anything. Meaning, even though there may be references to other games in it, it will not affect the story or your understanding whatsoever, so you can hop right into Ys 10 with no trouble. The exception to this rule is the first two games, but those games are meant to be played back to back anyway. But where would I recommend you start? Well, if you want the easy answer, go with Ys 8 Lacrimosa of Dana. The game is regarded as the best game in the series and an excellent starting point both gameplay and story-wise. Or you could start here with Ys 10 if you want, but of course that's up to you. Don't let anyone tell you what order you should play a game series in, just enjoy it in the way that you believe is right. Because there is no definitive answer to where you should start, that all depends on you. Whether you want to play it in release order, chronological order, or whatever interests you the most or is the most affordable option. But without delaying any further, let's get into the review. The Ys games have always had a compelling narrative that captures and explores the story in an adventurous way and wraps it up completely by the end of the game, making each journey's end feel bittersweet as we leave our companions behind. Nordics offers us a beautiful narrative with a great cast of characters, a nice setup plus twists in the right places, and by the end things are wrapped up nicely. It's also interesting focusing on two MCs as this leads to a different dynamic between Adol and Kaja, our main characters. As the two grow together and develop a bond, you really feel emotionally connected to both of these characters without focusing on a larger party of main characters. The story takes you through the conflict between the Baltic Sea Force, a group of Nords who seem ruthless at first, and the Griga, nearly invincible beings that can only be killed by mana wielders. Mana is a special power that's not magic, that only Nords can use. Adol gets caught up in the middle of this conflict and things escalate. He has no choice but to team up with Kaja, a member of the Sea Force, an intimidating fierce Nord. The two quite literally become attached to each other with some sort of mana-powered cuffs, so they are unable to leave each other's side, and Adol magically gains the power of mana. This already is really intriguing. It sets up the two leads very quickly, gets you right into things, and it has a really intriguing setting. You embark on a journey together to sever that tie and to destroy the Griga, bringing freedom to the seas once again. However, you are not alone as you set sail with many other comrades. The side characters, though tropey at times, do serve to complement the two leads and drive the plot forward in a natural way. And I really like these side characters. They have their own backstories and you really get to know them. It's nice that they're focusing on a smaller cast of characters whilst also not taking away from the two leads. And throughout the game I felt myself really rooting for these characters, especially when conflict was taking place, and because the storytelling does take a darker and much more mature tone, it's really brilliant that you get to know these characters and actually really root for them. It's also nice seeing the dynamic between the two leads, Adol and Kaja, as this is a really big highlight for me. It's nice to see two leads grow together as characters, not romantically, but with a sibling-like bond. Kaja at first is somewhat cautious of Adol, but then she lets her guard down when she realizes the two are comrades and have a lot in common. She gains a sort of respect and admiration for Adol throughout their journey, and it's really nice to see two leads in a non-romantic relationship in an anime game, and you could see these two characters being very realistic, friends. I also like the pacing of the storytelling, and it didn't mess around. You get right into things, your goals are set for you pretty much straight away, and it's refreshing to see such a fleshed out introduction to a story. Honestly, it almost reminds me of the Goonies, with most of the cast being teens and the whole pirate setting. It's hard not to feel that way, and that's super nostalgic to me. Even if I'm 19, that movie was a massive part of my childhood, so that's something I really like. The villains were also really interesting. Now, they don't get much in the way of scenes and too much screen time, but that's kind of the whole point. It allows them to stay intimidating and makes them a driving force for the conflict. And some of these villains are really well written. There's one in particular that's not that great. I don't really care about her, but the rest are really intriguing and they have some very interesting motives. I also love the sense of mystery throughout the story as we get little hints as to what's really going on early on, with some excellent foreshadowing, and when those twists hit, they hit really hard, and some really did catch me off guard. There's a lot of red herrings, and I really thought, oh, this is getting a bit predictable, but then the game just took a big 180, and it's insane. I love the way the game just focuses on a small cast of characters with just two leads. This allows them to be like fleshed out and gives them a dynamic between the two leads and the rest of the cast, which gives them a somewhat personal feeling. And these characters really are written quite well. Even the ones I didn't like so much, they were written so well to the point where I didn't like them because they were written in a way to be that way. However, the story does have its flaws, so that's now getting to those negatives. The first of which is the abysmal font. First of all, during cutscenes you can't even read the subtitles as there's no shadow on the text or highlights, so they blend in with the brightness of the screen, which made text in cutscenes borderline unreadable. Also, even though the pacing is great from a story standpoint, it's awful gameplay wise as it takes multiple chapters for you actually to have the freedom to do your own thing, and some mechanics get introduced way too late on in the game, so you don't fully get to explore in your own way, unlike in the other Ys games. I also have a few minor and personal complaints to quickly speak about. First of all, there was one particular boss that was hyped up the whole entire game for it to end in like 30 seconds, and they were the weakest boss in the whole entire game. Another is the mayor fucking sucks. They tried to get you to understand him as a character, but I just couldn't. He was selfish and just a twat. Now that's more of a me issue, but I just want to put out there, fuck the mayor, he's an awful person and an awful father. I also thought some plot points were dumb at times and too convenient. Now, nothing really affected my immersion in this sense, just a few scenes that didn't really add anything and felt pointless, and some that were just obviously made to drive the plot forward, but that's pretty standard for RPGs. Honestly, that's it for the complaints, and there's not too much I can say about it other than that. Overall, the story shocked me and kept me interested and intrigued throughout, with its well-written characters, action-packed scenes that kept your adrenaline up, storytelling that genuinely surprised me, and to top it off, the bond between the two leads was really awesome to see develop over time. Though the story does have its flaws, it's still excellent and a great example of how to explore a concept the right way. It's interesting when there's so many morally grey characters in one game, and it leads to some really interesting developments and plot points. But I spent way too much time on this topic, so let's move on. If the story and setting is what draws you in, the gameplay is what keeps you engaged, so let's get into it. The combat in Ys X takes a unique approach with its duo system. Instead of playing as a large party of characters, you play as just two characters, and you can link those characters together to perform duo attacks. This opens up a much more engaging system, but it's also a lot more limited, but in the best way possible. The combat system is not bloated, it's simple, and that's what allows it to succeed. You have your basic attack, skills, duo guard, dodge, and duo skills. All of these attacks can synergize pretty well, especially with how large and customizable the skill tree is. It's super fun building combos up, then unleashing a powerful duo skill to break an enemy's defense, and then moving in with a link attack with unique animations for each enemy variant is so smooth. The combat is a pure adrenaline rush, it's flashy, fun, and simple. It doesn't need to be complex because it exceeds at being engaging while staying limited, and the link attacks are just awesome. They feel so fluid and everything just flows together to create this exceptional combat system. Also, there's so much customization available for both characters. You can have a break build, an attack build, an all-around or even a risky build. This adds a lot of options for your playstyle, especially with a combination of a customizable skill tree and gear slots for both units. I used a break build for Kaja and an attack build for Adol. I'd often start off a boss fight with Kaja to break an enemy, then I'd switch to Adol to build up that damage. The team synergy between the two is perfect and allows for some interesting rotations. All of this makes boss fights especially engaging, and if you work on your timing and power the right attacks, you can unleash some powerful powerful counters with flashy animations. Enemies also have visual cues that can signal when to use a specific ability. For red ring attacks, use duo guard at the perfect time to unleash a counter attack, and for blue attacks you dash right through them to use a special attack. However, the combat isn't without its flaws, so let's get into it very quickly. The first of which is the inconsistent difficulty. I played on hard mode during my first playthrough, and a majority of the content was way too easy. Things definitely aren't balanced, especially with some fights being hyped up only to end in 30 seconds. Don't get me wrong, there were a few challenging fights, but for the most part the difficulty felt inconsistent. The second flaw is the dodge ability. It's useless, I don't think I ever had to use it, it's slow and it doesn't cover any distance. Now the dash ability was more effective, but can only be triggered whilst using it against blue attacks, so it fell out of place when a core ability of an action game is practically useless. I also noticed some buggy animations after performing attacks where the scenes didn't transition smoothly, but this only happened very rarely. How does Ys X stand out from the previous games? Well, with the ability to control your own ship. And does it succeed at capturing that aspect of gameplay? Not exactly. The first few hours of naval gameplay is boring, slow, and janky. You start off with 0 upgrades, making the process of getting from place to place extremely tedious and hard to control too. That is until you start upgrading your ship and things become much easier to control and sailing becomes much faster. But that doesn't change the fact that the early game is an absolute drag. But the game does make up for it with its mechanics involving naval combat. You can take part in battles at sea, loot last items, recapture land, and there's a lot to find out at sea. Naval battles are janky at first, but once you get those upgrades it becomes super fun. With many weapons at your arsenal, it makes naval combat highly immersive. And if you break an enemy ship's defences, you can ram into their ship and take over it, where you can enter combat on their ship, which is just bloody awesome. And as I said earlier, you also have island recaptures, which is similar to the defense minigame in Ys 8, but you're on the offense this time. You fulfill objectives on the ocean, take out pylons, destroy enemy ships, and get the highest score possible. The more objectives you complete, the more buffs and rewards you earn. After finishing off at sea, you then enter a dungeon on land. With those buffs activated, you have to recapture that land. Gameplay can vary on these islands, from parkour courses, a nest of enemies, to boss rushes. It's a great blend of mechanics and highly replayable. I really enjoyed this mechanic. But that's not all, you've also got fishing out at sea to catch tuna, you can bond with your crewmates and have dinner together, and all of this just adds that sense of community with your crew, especially with those random crew conversations out at sea. It's really charming. You also may encounter merchants out at sea that you can trade with, and there's even some fake merchant ships that will attack you if you get too close, which really caught me off guard the first time I found one of them, but it was super sick to see. And honestly, the mid to late game naval gameplay is very immersive and engaging, but those early hours could drag on and may turn you away at first. Getting those upgrades is easy, but it shouldn't be necessary so early on just to enjoy the game. There's a lot of value here, but to unlock the best parts does take patience, and things should have been adjusted, but for now, let's move on. Let's speak about the traversability and exploration. Ys X offers us many modes of movement. From a grapple hook to a literal hoverboard, this enhances the exploration heavily and makes traversal feel free and smooth. Exploration is also great. There are many chests to find, some great level design, and some great environmental puzzles where you have to use your surroundings and your abilities to your advantage. I can't spoil most of these abilities as they appear later on in game, but let's just say that they further enhance the exploration, even though it's already quite in depth. And with that being said, I could confidently say that this game has captured that same adventure in me that Ys 8 did. I had so much fun exploring each island and sometimes going back after unlocking new abilities to access previously inaccessible areas. I also love the way that Adol and Kaja have their own mana abilities that become useful during exploration, where you hold down their basic attack and perform a unique ability. Adol burns vines, whilst Kaja summons an ice platform to get to higher areas. All of this adds a lot of depth to the level design, and most areas make use of these mechanics to their advantage. The movement is so satisfying and complements the environments, making exploration fun and traversability accessible, adding some depth to that already great level design. Again, these mechanics are basic, but they don't need to be anything other than simple. It just adds to that classic RPG feel, which is so fun. We also have the fishing, and I mean it wouldn't be Ys without the fishing, and I honestly love this iteration. It's simple, charming, and fun the way it should be. However, I did notice there was a lesser amount of fish to catch compared to the previous entries, which is a little bit of a letdown. My only complaint about the exploration would be the environment. Everything mostly looks the same, and there wasn't really a single location that stood out to me aesthetic wise, with a few exceptions being late game areas. However, gameplay wise, each island definitely stands out. I did like the overall look of the game, but I do have to say I would have loved some more variety in some way. I have another minor complaint, but this just means the devs did a great job, and that's the fact that I wish there were more islands to explore, because to be honest there aren't many, and I felt somewhat sad exploring the final location, and I also wish that they would have added more puzzles like the older Ys titles, because that's been missing from the past few titles I've noticed. I adored my time with Ys X, with its simple mechanics that brought me back to an era where simplicity just worked. The game offers a great setting with a beautiful story and a lovable cast of characters, with a stunning art style and a banging soundtrack to go alongside it. There is a lot to love about this game, and I'll never forget my time with it. I especially love those cinematic chase scenes, absolutely blood pumping. It's a simple action RPG that doesn't need bloated over the top mechanics or hard to understand menus. It's a modern classic. However, the game does suffer from many issues, and with an enhanced version of the game, Ys X Nordics, with new elements and improvements on the horizon in Japan, I hope to see those issues rectified, even if I personally disagree with a full price re-release. And with that being said, I'll have to give Ys X Nordics an 87% on the rev meter for its exceptional use of classic mechanics that capture nostalgia and adventure. If you have any feedback on this review, please let me know in the comments, it really helps. This channel thrives off of feedback, so don't hold back. I strive to improve and create the best possible reviews. But for now, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next saga.